Okay, just the sort of theme of this presentation. So think big, tread lightly. It's the motto of the Human Elephant Foundation, who's sort of sponsored my attendance at this workshop and who is one of our funders of the Roving Reporters program. How to write good stories. We're going to look at this very briefly sort of today. The other things, we'll touch on feature stories as well. The other stuff we're looking at is investigative journalism, narrative non-fiction, which I won't cover today, but hopefully as our engagement with conservation organisations that go through, we would move into those kind of fields as well. That's when it gets really, really exciting. But for now, we're only going to start at the kind of real basics of where thing. Now, just very understanding what makes a good news story. Is this news? Okay, you might have all heard it. I know the ocean stewards have seen this before. Is that news? Huh? Okay, why is that news? Huh? It's unusual. Okay, that's a core thing that you guys need to understand in terms of communicating science and communicating conservation issues. Issues don't make a story. No matter how big the CITES issues that are rising there, you've got to anchor those stories on something unusual and then bring in the issues. You know, you've got to find something, instead of saying, listen, there's been a big fallout between this faction and that faction at a conference, whatever. Issue-based stuff doesn't generate news. You need to find something to anchor that on that then tells the story. So always look for unusual things. Things like the roadkill. There's a presentation on roadkill in yesterday's session. It's fascinating. But it goes into much bigger issues about biodiversity in that. So you anchor the stories on something that catches the people's attention. Just a little bit of background. So yeah, don't forget that. The interesting stories are mostly also here. Interesting stories are mostly about people and what they do. So you need to look at trying to find your story and anchor it around a person. A story about, like I say, there might be some really amazing things about that's happening about butterflies and some amazing research done. Writing the story about those butterflies and interesting research is not going to generate a reader's interest. But writing about the person who's involved in that makes it. People interested. Stories are about people and the challenges they face and what they do. And that brings me to the second thing, is how do we make this relevant to, Sabian said, like, what was the previous one? Interesting stories most about people, what to do. How do we make this relevant to scientists and critical conservation issues? The interesting stories are mostly about people, what they do. Okay, we'll come back to that towards the end of the presentation. I wanted you to think about it just as we're going through. Basically, and this is a bit of a repetition of what was presented last night and the thing and what you think, but basically what drives roving reporters is that stories have the power to change the world. They have the power to open minds and protect our planet. They bring social and environmental issues to life. They foster awareness and action, dwell in possibility, and offer solutions and hope. That is really what kind of drives roving from the Redford Centre, Robert Redford, in Sundance, and it kind of drives what we believe is, the value of telling stories, particularly in the conservation sector. Now, my background does not come originally from an environmental background. I was very deeply involved in covering a lot of political violence in the whole Khamos in the 1980s. Stuff like that, covering massacres like that, and it deeply affected me. But there's a huge commitment to what one was doing at that time. And what I'm saying is now being reinvested in a really nice positive field, like environmental journalism, compared to where I've come from. I was sort of combat decorated journalist, so to speak. But this is a really exciting field, and it's with that same passion and energy that I'm now putting into sort of environmental journalism. And as you heard from last night, a lot of that was due to a second story we did was about a convicted turtle poacher that harnessed our energies and looked at how that story could be used to promote environmental education, and just everything fell into place because there's so many interesting issues that came out in the story. So just to give you a sense of where we're going, I'll go through this very quickly. Currently we're running two series called The Thin Green Line. These are recently launched. That's focusing on terrestrial issues. It's really about looking about collaborations for conservation and issues like that. We looked at the rewilding of the Smugglers World Heritage Site, the all about entrepreneurs and, you know, about people, hair salons and restaurants and things like that, all creating benefits way beyond the borders of the World Heritage Site, but in a sense say, you know, you need to create these benefits. And so, I mean, it's really nice stuff. Working, that's the turtle poacher with the educational officer, talking about, you know, the whole thing about indigenous plants and that. And also about innovative settlement of land claims. People who've gone through the restitution process, they qualify. A lot of them are qualifying for bursaries, and then once they finish their bursaries, they're coming out and actually getting internships smugly. So it was a really nice story. And then more significantly, recently we started what we call an Ocean Watch series. It started with a front page lead when we launched the series on the day of Grinrod's Ocean Steward Science Session. That was about gas and oil exploits. Now, I'm just giving you a sense of where we're coming, because what I'm wanting to do is to give people, must always feel free to contact roving reporters with sort of stories that we could look at. We don't look at a high quantity turnover. We really look at sort of more quality, wanting to get really quality stories out there. And we've got access to be able to access sort of funding for particular stories. Like, for example, gas and oil, we've got a really nice relationship with Takakaba Trust. That story on this gas and oil exploits could be one of the stories that they'll support. So just give you a sense of where roving report is coming from. The core objectives of Ocean Watch are to report on critical issues affecting the health of our oceans, serve as a platform to promote worthy initiatives like Blue Flun's Whale Time Project and the Ocean Stewards Program. It's really exciting to be connected to those programs, writing about this. Some really exciting stuff happening there. And what we're hoping to do is to become a regular feature, to have Ocean Watch as a regular feature in one of the local titles. That's the kind of core objectives of moving forward on that. That's just some insight into last year, some of the students who took part, and some of the students arose from some of their work last year. We want to come back to coming back to that was just to give you a brief background on roving report. So the questions to ask yourself when you're looking at if you're wanting to think how you've got a story, we want to communicate something about a project or something you're doing. The two things you need to ask yourself, or five, like, is it new? Is it unusual? Is it interesting? Is it significant? And is it about people? Tick all those boxes, you've got something worth writing about. But and it doesn't have to be all five. Sometimes something that's just unusual and it's new, just that alone can make the story. But those are generally what an editor in a newsroom will be looking at. Just saying, hey, well, what is this new? You know, CITES is gone. The COP17's gone by. So a story on that might not necessarily make news now unless there's something new that's coming out of it and it's unusual. Now, the very cornerstones is a very simple way in which a news story, you look at news, is the way it's basically how to actually tell that story. And what in the news industry, you call it the 5 W's and the H. Would anyone have an idea what that is?
When, what, how.
Yeah. Now that's simple. That's what a news story does. It basically says who, what, where, when, why, how. And then you've got to just structure that in a very, very short, punchy way. And it's the crux of all news. So when you sort of think and you want to communicate to someone, I think it also helps with anything. You're doing a presentation about some communication thing. Those are the kind of questions that immediately. News is about explaining almost. Imagine, say, if you're going to do a presentation, but you're going to run along to let's say you're running upstairs to on the way to something, your grandmother or a little kid asks you, what are you doing today, or what are you writing about? So if you can summarize it, you've only got 30 seconds or 45 seconds to explain them. That is how you write a news story. You know, you sum it up and you pack it up. Now it comes from the what you call inverted pyramid, where you start with the most important information first, important details and other general background info. The inverted triangle method also comes from, it's changed a little bit today, but it comes from the old days when newspapers were laid out on in paper. You'd type out the reams of it would be laid out manually. You'd have these strips. The story would be printed out in strips, and then they'd have to cut and paste and put it on the story. Now what they'll do is there's been laying out a whole lot of stories, some of them will be chopped at the bottom. So you don't leave a cliffhanger in a news story. You don't put in information at the end of the story waiting to like build up people's tension and then drop a cliffhanger, because in the editing process, the whole thing, people are deadline, they cut. So your story must stand. The first 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs must stand on their own and be able to go through it. Just another way in which that's thing, the supporting information, additional facts, least important information comes in the end. Basically, I think this applies to everything. I mean, everything about presentations, everything about writing. It's really important. If you're going to write something, don't sort of imagine that a person who's good at writing, a journalist, just bashes that stuff out, and there it is, a brilliant story. You revise. You've got to look at your work critically, and you've got to revise. And that's really where, if you're wanting to engage in good writing, doing good presentations, revise the stuff, read it out aloud. It's the best way, because you're hearing what, if you read a story out aloud, you're actually hearing where it gets clumsy. It's really about fine-tuning and fine-tuning. You can never do more, you can carry on revising.
You've got to revise that one, Fred.
Huh? Oh, shush! My apologies, that's all. Okay, my apologies for that. Yeah, that was a huge one. Okay, scientifically, Juncus crassi, what is that?
Plant.
Yeah, what kind of plant?
In a wetland.
Yeah. Now, you don't use terms like that in your story unless you explain it afterwards. You think what it is. It's that in demographs. So you use the common names. You don't try and impress with this fancy language and say, hey, I'm a scientist and I know all these things. Use it that a 9-year-old kid will understand. If you do need to put in the scientific term for a thing, you can put in brackets afterwards. But use colloquial sort of language that would work. So I think this is a useful thing to imagine. I mean, here's the useful. I can't remember. I haven't sourced this. It's sourced on the other one where the revision was won or lost. Obviously, this is the old copy. But imagine what had happened to a surgeon told his assistant to cut the big tube during heart operation. This is about understanding the jargon. So, a surgeon will talk about a patient's aorta or vena cava, so there's no mistake. That's in the specialist field. But when you're going to write, that kind of language is acceptable in that field, and you engage with another scientist about your research or whatever, you can talk, you can use those terms. But your ordinary readers will understand if you refer to the story if your story refers to the aorta as the main tube carrying blood out the heart. So that's giving an example of how to explain scientific terms. And the same applies to, say, marine science. It applies to all science. This was developed originally. You bridge between the scientists and readers, and wherever possible, must explain scientific terms and jargon in a language your audience will understand. And obviously, you need to understand that yourself first. It sort of helps. Now, golden rules is write simply. You keep sentences, paragraphs short. Don't use flowery language and descriptions. Say it was a wonderful, beautiful day. You show it. You rather say, if there's sweat dropping off someone's eyebrows, you can understand maybe it's hot. Or you rather don't use descriptive language. There's a whole language about what you say. You show, don't tell. You create a picture in mind. Imagine you're a movie director and you're directing a camera crew. If you're going to do things and you want to create a scene or mood, rather imagine yourself as a sort of directing a film crew and saying, hey, I want you to capture that. And you actually describe it. And you don't say, oh, it was a cold and windy day. You can create an impression by describing what clothing the person's wearing or the action that's happening. So you delete all adjectives, except when people are talking. Okay, be impartial. I think it's not something, but it's really important to be able to, as scientists, you might be able to say if you're doing a story on if you're going to do, if someone was, and you are communicating a story about a project, say if it was about mining, a mine that's going to be in juxtaposition to, say, the development of a biodiversity economy node, and you've got these two competing interests. It's still important to give voice in your engagement with others about your opposition's kind of position in the stake. It actually just shows that you've got a well-informed perspective. And it's really important in your communication not to just take a one line and and take an activist approach. Obviously, there is realm for that in places, but if you're talking about, if you wanted to communicate it in the media, you need to be able to show that you've got you can talk with authoritative voice and you know what the pros and cons of different things are. Use active verbs. I think that fairly speaks for itself. If you're talking about that, it's always used. It's about Tom cleans the house is cleaned by Tom. Sarah writes the letter's been written by Sarah. I think you can see which style works better. It's active, so use the active sense. Ice factors, that's what you're always wanting to have a look, is make something come up. If you want to be able to sell a story, pitch a story, find something that makes someone go, how? Sure, whatever. Then you've got something. You've got something to work with. And your introduction to a story always becomes critically important. Of how once you've got your information you want to write, it's we were talking about earlier. The friend has just asked you what you're writing about. You only have 20 seconds to make her say what you're going to say. That is your introduction. Something that'll make someone go, "Phew, that's interesting." Instead of like going on a long ramble and then getting to that point. The best advice of all, write your stories if you're telling it to an 11-year-old nephew, niece, cousin, brother or sister. You write in the language they'll understand. You'll be well on the right path from start to finish. Especially if you've got those arch factors or two. So that's very, very simple wrap up of like kind of news writing. Tony Carney's here from the Mercury. He might be able to add a couple of things in the discussions about where I would have missed out, give sort of advice and topic. Certainly our sort of top environment to write in this product without a doubt. And so I think it's really good to have had him here in this forum. Feature writing, we're not just going to touch on really, but it's really a journey into another world altogether, where the basic principles of good storytelling apply. Especially, it's a word with 5 words. Let's play hangman down. Okay, good storytelling, I won't go into it, but good storytelling dating to the days of the Greeks when they first started writing stories. You've got all there's just ways in which stories get told, and that's what a good feature writing is all about. But let's have a look. 5 words. Sorry? Well, that's 5 letters. A word with 5 letters, huh? No, there is 1 letter in drama that is in that word. You've got a pole, 1 pole up. And it's the first letter. The A, there's an A in it, and it's the first letter. What's that? Action, yeah. Okay. It's action, action, action. That's what you need in a story.
But you can't count.
No, it's 1 word. I'm just giving you the thing. But yeah, you need to show people doing things. It's not issue. We're saying it's not about issues. You bring the issues through people's action. Person studying, they're doing the thing of butterfly. You show them studying a butterfly, whatever, and you capture the people's imagination through that by showing a person in action. And for action, you need so also I think it's correct number of words. Sorry? No. What if you're going to have action in a story? What do you need? Hey? We're getting close, yeah. Who said something there? People, yeah. Character. You've got to have action without a person. So your story, when you're talking about feature writing, you're building a story around a character and action. It's a basic principle of storytelling. There's got to be someone you identify with, and who's passionate about an issue, and tell them, and it's obviously there are other ways of telling a feature story, but generally What's going to make a story really interesting is a story about a person who's confronted with the challenges and how they overcome them. If they fail or lose, becomes kind of part of the story, or they're raising the kind of issues. That's really about what feature writing opens its door to. And there are many ways to write. There are different styles. There are no rules on how to write a kind of good feature story. The best way to do that is to just read and read and read and read. Read the New York Science Journal. We don't see much environmental journalism in this country, well, not at the level that we see in terms of good storytelling that we see overseas. New York Science Journal has brilliant stories in it, and that's where you're wanting to look at learning. If you're wanting to learn to write well, you're not going to go anywhere if you don't read the other stories. And then you look at the styles that people are using, you can follow that. Now, so as I said, your story must show a person doing something. That's the way you bring the issues alive, and you project your readers into that action space and put the readers in that action of that story. There is, in terms of, I'll end on this note, what you would call explanatory narrative, and there is a set of, there's no structure, but this is very wide. It's like, as I said, when you're talking about a news story and you want to get information out, there's an event happening and you're wanting to communicate that, you need to do that short and succinctly. Feature writing can lend itself to stories that are up to sort of 1,500 words, short feature, 750, 1,000 words, up to long journalism pieces, which we also don't really have a market for in this country, but it is out there, and I think people should be writing, looking at trying to get, you look at National Geographic and things like that, they are long pieces. But basically, a very simple thing, it comes from a guy called Jack Hart, Storycraft, who's guided a lot of award-winning journalists through to Pulitzer Prize-winning pieces over the last sort of 6-7 years. I can't remember which, but he wrote a really good book called Storycraft. If anyone is interested in wanting to get into serious writing, it's a really, really classic book. And he comes up with this thing where you've got a basic structure to bring people in. You've got action, and then your digression. You explain where that setting is taking place. That is where your issues come in. That is where you provide the context of why this person's doing it. And you say, hold on, this person's working in research. They haven't seen this butterfly. It hadn't been seen for 25 years. That would be a news story if you were going to hinge it on. And you say, so-and-so last week, person out working in Smangilisa came across a species of butterfly that was thought to be extinct. That's a news story. Your feature story about that person would show that person action and then give that explanation. It's like the feature story is about creating moods and that. And so you go from action, explanation, action, explanation, action, and you've got a really nice explanatory narrative. But it's important to have those, and that's where you're saying you bring your issues into your explanation, where you digress a bit, you move away from the spotlight, and you tell the people, well, what is the context? Why is this person doing this? Why is this person riding his bicycle? Or how did you get the bicycle? If you're writing a feature story about Trees for Life, like classic, a nice, lovely colour intro to the story about the bicycles is what you raised. All these yellow, this picture. You can picture, you can visit it. We could all visit it. When you told that about these bicycles all in Tanzania, you said it is. That is a classic story. That's a lovely. So that gives you a sense of how, you tell stories how your own individual style, your own individual voice, how you talk. You just give voice to that, but give it to you just play around with it, tweak it a bit. I'm going to end that on a thing what we refer to in journalism as immersive reporting. And I'm hoping I haven't made typos in this because I wrote it out yesterday. So excuse that one or lost thing. I'm really still embarrassed. It wasn't in the original slide, remember? That grinned right, huh? All the work that you scientists and conservationists are doing, from the study of butterflies, frogs, or seaweed, through to big issues like the trade endangered species and the creation of the Umfolozi biodiversity economy node and the expansion of marine protected areas, lend themselves to immersive reporting. Now, which you see very little of in the local media. There's an awful lot of space of it. What do you think I'm talking about when I talk about immersive reporting? Yeah, it can refer to that. It's not quite correct. You're on the right track. Anyone else want to venture?
I'm trying to engage the reader in the issue that you're reporting on.
Yeah, it would be, but how would you do that? You're getting there? Getting there?
Emotions.
Sorry?
Some kind of emotions.
No? You're going to immerse yourself in something. What are you
Put
doing?
yourself in someone else's shoes.
Yeah, you actually going, like say for example, it's say from a journalist's point of view, not say the scientist, but I was going to do immersive report, it would be going and spending time and immersing yourself in that environment with those people and just being a fly on the wall, observing and whatever, and spending like weeks on following, tagging someone around. It's actually getting into that environment, immersing yourself in the environment, then reporting it. Now you guys are already immersed in your own environments. So yes, you are right. It's like, it's taking, it lends itself, you could rather, and not just writing yourself, write about one of your colleagues or whatever. But think of it from a storytelling perspective. Think of what they're doing and how you do, because you all are immersed in issues. So, and I'm going to use an example, and I do think with the media, I think Tony would also be able to tell you, the media in this country is in doldrums, especially the print media. It's like in complete and utter doldrums. So it's if you're going to if you need to communicate, there's very exciting stuff happening in the conservation front and in the conservation industry. It's probably one of the most exciting places in the world to live in terms of conservation and the issues that we face here and the challenges that are faced here, which makes for good stories. If that's going to be communicated, conservation organisations are going to really need to be able to up the game, because the media is not going to be doing it for you. There's limited impact roving reporters as the agency we're doing. I mean, ideally my vision is to develop roving reporters into a kind of online news base like Daily Maverick. I'm not sure if you guys have read the Daily Maverick. It's a news thing, but looking at environmental agency. But that's just going to take time. It's a one-man agency here. It's not going to sort of happen overnight. But let me end on giving an example of that action explanation narrative. Have you guys heard of the story Chasing Bayla? Okay, it was last year's Pulitzer Prize-winning piece in feature writing. And it's an immersive story. It was about this guy, Michael Moore, and he'd waited all day, really all his life, for the whale to surface. This is the introduction. The suffering giant he thought he could save, that science had to save, but it had come down to this. Okay, now you see how they're introducing that. There's already action, there's already character. It's placing you in some kind of action, sort of setting the scene. 30 meters should open inverted commas, excuse me. So put this together. Okay, 30 meters, Dr. Michael Moore called out. Moore braced himself against the steel of the Zodiac's platform tower as the boat closed in on the whale in the heaving Florida waters. Through the rangefinder, you could see the tangled mass of ropes clinched tightly around her. It was impossible to tell where the ropes began and where they ended. Okay, now you see that's action. It's giving you some kind of sense of this much he knew, the ropes were carving into her. Bayla was in pain. He was tempted to look away. It was almost too much to see. Her V-shaped spray erupted, then disappeared into the mist as she slipped beneath the surface. A spot plane circling overhead radioed. They could still see her silhouette. She hadn't gone deep. Get in close if you can, Moore said to the boat's driver. Bayla would come up for air again soon. Then he would have his chance. For nearly 3 decades, Moore had dedicated himself to the North Atlantic right whales like Bayla. He knew every inch of their anatomy, every detail of the strange and glorious physiology that made them so astoundingly powerful and so utterly defenseless against the ropes. Though majestic and doomed, his love and his burden, he believed he could save them, but in those 30 years he'd watched too many succumb. Saving just 2 female whales a year could stabilize a population that humans had driven down to just 450 from the teeming thousands that once greeted settlers to the New World. Now, I think that gives you an example of the action explanation. It's quite a long bit of action in the beginning. But then he explains he gives the context of what this guy, he shows him action and gives him context. That's all about these whales and whatever. And that entire story follows that framework. For the next thing after that, you'll see, if you go into Chasing Bayla, it's really amazing, also a really amazing multimedia piece, which should also give you guys ideas of what can be done with the stuff we're working on. You plug in that and you read it online. It's got all the sounds of the whales. As you're reading it, you're hearing all the ocean sounds, and it's got all the pictures associated, like every second paragraph, whatever's got pictures of that or talking to that, where you click on it, and so it's a whole multimedia piece, which shows you the power of the way we can sort of begin to communicate the science. So, that's about it. We'd be able to talk for ages about other examples, but I hope that that last example gives you a sense of the difference between the news writing and the feature writing. You know, the news writing, tell it short, punchy, keep it short, sweet. You want to tell people who, what, where, when, why is happening. If there's been a major discovery, keep it to the point. Then if you want to give people a greater sense of what this all means, you then use the kind of feature writing, or you contact someone like Roman Portis to write the story for you.